There are homes we were never allowed to enter, not because of locks, not because of prayers spoken once and forgotten, but because of one thing that made the atmosphere legally untouchable. And before you assume I'm exaggerating, let me be very clear. I'm not sharing rumor or church folklore. I am confessing what I enforced when I was still serving the other side. I was trained as a witch within organized occult systems. Not the Hollywood version, real hierarchy, real assignments, real surveillance of believers. We studied houses the way thieves study security systems. We looked for open doors, weak points, emotional fractures, spiritual neglect. And most homes had them, even Christian homes, but some didn't. There were houses we marked and immediately withdrew from. No probing, no lingering, no second attempts. The moment we assessed them, something invisible but immovable stood at the threshold. It wasn't fear that stopped us. It was law. I remember asking my superior why certain houses were off limits. His answer still echoes in my mind. There is a presence there we are not authorized to violate. That sentence haunted me long before my deliverance. Here's what shocked me later. Those homes weren't owned by pastors or prophets. They weren't always loud, spiritual families. Some were quiet, ordinary. But they carried something consistent, something ancient, something we could not override. At the time, I didn't call it holy. I called it dangerous. Because whenever we tried to observe those homes from the spirit realm, our vision blurred, our access collapsed, assignments failed before they started. It was like trying to walk through a wall that wasn't visible but absolutely real. After Jesus rescued me, after the scales fell and I finally understood the authority of his name, I realized what that one thing was and why darkness cannot cross it. I'm sharing this because many of you watching are under attack and don't know why, and others are protected and don't know how. By the end of this message, you'll understand both. Stay with me. What I'm about to expose is not mystical, it's biblical, and it's still working today. In the occult, we didn't guess which homes were vulnerable. We assessed them. Every assignment began with a scan, not physical, but spiritual. We were trained to read atmospheres the way doctors read charts. Emotional residue, spoken words, objects, patterns, altars, both intentional and accidental. Most homes told a story the moment we approached them. Fear was loud. Bitterness had a smell. Unforgiveness left doors wide open. Trauma created echoes that attracted activity without us even trying. Many Christian homes assumed they were covered because they owned a Bible or attended church. But ownership is not authority, and attendance is not alignment. So we looked for consistency. Was God honored daily or occasionally? Was his name spoken casually or reverently? Were there thresholds marked? Or was the house spiritually unmanaged? Unmanaged space is permission, and permission is everything in the spirit realm. But then there were houses that disrupted our process. When we approached them, something interfered immediately. Our scan wouldn't complete. The atmosphere didn't respond the way it should. Instead of information, there was resistance. Instead of access, there was pushback. It felt like standing in front of an invisible gate that refused to acknowledge us. These homes shared one defining trait. They were consciously dedicated spaces. Not perfect homes, not sinless families, but homes that had been claimed, where the inhabitants didn't just believe in God, they had invited his rule. There was a difference between a house that hosted God occasionally and a house that had surrendered ownership. We used a term internally, sealed thresholds. Once a threshold was sealed, entry was illegal. Not difficult, illegal. Even high-ranking spirits could not cross without consequence. Attempts to force access resulted in backlash. Assignments rebounded. Monitors lost position. That's why we avoided them. What sealed a threshold wasn't decor or symbols. It was authority expressed intentionally. A declaration that didn't fade after Sunday. A decision that governed daily life. After my deliverance, this made terrifying sense. Scripture says, "Choose this day whom you will serve." In those homes, that choice had been made and enforced. In the next chapter, I'll tell you exactly what that one thing was. Not vaguely, not metaphorically, precisely. And once you understand it, you'll see why darkness still recognizes it today. The one thing that made those homes untouchable was not an object, not a symbol, and not a ritual item. It was intentional verbal dedication of the home to Jesus Christ's Lordship, maintained, not momentary. Let me explain this carefully, because this is where many people misunderstand. In the occult, words are not emotional expressions. Words are legal instruments. Spoken intention establishes jurisdiction. Silence leaves space unclaimed. When a homeowner verbally surrendered their house out loud to Jesus and lived in agreement with that declaration, something happened in the spirit realm that could not be reversed by darkness. Those homes were no longer neutral territory. They were no longer personal space. They became governed ground. I remember approaching a home once that looked completely ordinary. No crosses on the wall, no worship music playing, no visible sign of faith. But the moment we tried to observe it spiritually, the access failed. It felt like hitting a locked door we couldn't even see. I pushed harder and instantly felt warning pressure. That's when I stopped. Later, I learned why. Weeks earlier, the woman who lived there had walked room to room and said something simple but devastating to darkness. Jesus Christ, this house belongs to you. I surrender every room, every doorway, every future moment to your authority. She didn't shout. She didn't perform. She meant it. That single act created a legal boundary. Here's what many believers don't realize. Demons do not fear belief, they fear ownership transfer. When ownership changes, access rights are revoked. We could tempt individuals. We could influence environments nearby. But we could not cross the threshold without violating spiritual law. And that carries consequences even for high-ranking spirits. We tested this. We always tested it. We tried waiting for sin, for conflict, for emotional weakness. But unless the homeowner verbally revoked the dedication or lived in persistent, willful rebellion, we had no authority to enter. The house itself resisted us. The atmosphere enforced the boundary. This is why Scripture says, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." That verse isn't poetic, it's legal language. It's a jurisdictional claim. After my deliverance, I did this immediately. I stood in my own home, the same one once used for dark practices, and I declared it surrendered to Jesus. The shift was instant. The heaviness lifted. The echoes stopped. Peace didn't just arrive, it stayed. If you're listening to this and realizing you've never done this intentionally, that's not condemnation. That's an invitation. In the next chapter, I'll explain why many Christians are still attacked, even after praying, and how to permanently reinforce this spiritual boundary so it cannot be challenged.